By the middle of 1987, the Provisional IRA adopted a new strategy. Their strategy shifted to attacking isolated RUC and Army outposts, denying them access and targeting anyone aiding in their operation. The same was planned for Loughgall. At around 7 p.m., the attackers drove into the village from the northeast, following Main Street and passing Sloane's house, now the Museum of Orange Culture. One team of 5 were in a Toyota Hiace. The second team drove a digger stolen from a nearby farm some miles in the opposite direction. The excavator was driven by Declan Arthurs, who was led by a scout car to provide support. The first team did 2 slow drive-bys of the RUC base and saw little activity, which supposedly unnerved them. Ex-IRA members later learned from the investigation that they discussed leaving and thought something was amiss. Finally, it was decided to go ahead with the attack. The digger was parked across from the church and the bomb was armed. Tony Gormley and Gerard O'Callaghan rode shotgun on the digger that was driven by Declan Arthurs, while the rest of the support unit followed in their Hiace. From the moment they entered the village until now, about a quarter of an hour had passed and the SAS, police, and army had already taken their positions. The van was driven by Eugene Kelly, and in the driver's seat was Brigade Commander Patrick Kelly. Jimmy Lina, Patrick McKerney, and Seamus Donnelly rode in the back. All wore boiler suits, bulletproof vests, and balaclavas. The digger crashed through the fence and moved next to the police base with its 400-pound payload. How the story plays out from now is up for debate, as police and military presence signed the State Secrets Act. Some believe the men in the digger were still unnerved about the lack of police activity and may have indicated to their commander they wanted to leave in the van as soon as possible. Seeing this, Patrick Kelly jumped out and fired into the building, giving the 3 in the digger no other option than to go through with their plan. The official report claims that Declan and his 2 supporters crashed through without needing to push, and that the 3 men from the Hiace simultaneously jumped out and laid down automatic covering fire. Ex-RUC Special Branch Agent John Shackles claims the SAS had strung detonating cord along the wood line across the road from the station and beyond the football field. Immediately before the IRA was ambushed, this was set off, distracting them. They probably jumped, believing they had a premature detonation of their own bomb. Dozens of police and SAS began firing at the 8 men from all directions, beginning with the SAS inside of the building, shooting them from behind. All 8 members of the attack were killed fairly quickly. This drew anger from Republicans, upset at the supposed shoot-to-kill policy the SAS employed. They also objected to the presence of the SAS because the RUC were at least composed of local men. In spite of the ambush going exactly as the SAS and RUC wanted, there were still a few discrepancies.
At the inquest, the SAS described shooting 3 of the men as they lay on the ground. It had been the biggest single loss of life suffered by the IRA since 1921.
For one, why did 3 of the IRA volunteers have gunshot residue on their skin, indicating a shooting at close range? Why was Declan Arthurs shot in a nearby laneway if he wasn't armed? He only had a cigarette lighter in his hand.
36 gunshot wounds. I don't know which one killed him. He was getting away. He wasn't armed. He had no gun or anything on him.
He had the lighter that he'd used to light the fuse for the bomb.
He had the lighter in his hand, yes.
He lit the bomb that went off.
He had
blew
to.
out the police station.
He had to. Yes, he drove the digger, the mechanical digger, into the station.
If the whole village was closely monitored, how did 3 IRA volunteers escape in their scout cars? I can't stress how small the community of Loughgall is. These cars would have easily been recognized. The IRA claims they shot their way out and looked back to see several attempting to surrender. It's probably not true that they had to shoot their way out, but they probably did look back and see people being shot up close. Furthermore, we should ask, what role did the Hughes brothers play in the ambush, if any? I spoke to a local, and I won't name my source, who was driving to the village that day when he heard the crackle of gunfire. He was stopped by the army, who told him to turn back. After he told me the story, I asked what he thought about the killing of Anthony Hughes, and he said that the 2 brothers were almost certainly IRA. According to the Hughes family, Anthony was driving a white Citroën GS with his brother, Oliver, in the passenger seat, wearing blue coveralls, similar, unfortunately, to those worn by the IRA.
An innocent civilian, Anthony Hughes, was also shot dead.
Meanwhile, Anthony Hughes, the innocent victim of the Loughgall shootout, was also buried. Police have launched an inquiry into how he was shot.
Supposedly, they had just gotten back from doing some car repairs, explaining the coveralls. The car was about 130 yards in the opposite direction from the police station, and fire came at them from behind, killing Anthony and wounding Oliver. The latter got out of the car with an adrenaline rush and was shot 14 times, not even hearing them order him to surrender and stand down. According to local unionists, these two men were known to at least aid the IRA and had first aid supplies in their Citroen. Two more discrepancies remain. The most glaring is how the SAS and Special Branch had so much knowledge of the attack, but a minor one is the issue of the recovered weapons.
The RUC has claimed that the weapons recovered from the 8 IRA men and which were displayed yesterday in Armagh had been used in the murders of 7 people in the past 2 years. 4 were UDR members, and the 3 civilians were connected with the construction industry, and the IRA alleged they had contracts to repair bomb-damaged police stations. According to the police, several of the rifles had also been used in attempted murders. One of the weapons, a Ruger revolver, had been stolen from an RUC reservist killed in an IRA attack on Ballygawley police station in County Tyrone in December 1985.
I'm not a gun YouTuber, so I won't go into the ins and outs, but police at the time said they linked them to 7 murders and 12 attempted murders. However, documents only declassified in 2017 revealed that they had ballistics tests linking them to between 40 and 50 killings, and that these 8 guns were responsible for every single killing in the counties of Fermanagh and Tyrone in 1987 prior to the ambush. Why would you hide this fact from the public? Could it be because the East Tyrone Brigade was by far the most active unit in the Provisional IRA, and that it would be bad optics to maintain such a strong police presence now that most of the trouble was over?
Earlier in the same area, the funeral took place for Patrick Kelly, the man believed to be the commander of the IRA's East Tyrone Brigade. Walking behind the coffin was his pregnant wife, who clutched her husband's paramilitary gloves and beret.
On the topic of the hunt for a supposed spy within the IRA, we have to talk about the assassination of Harry Breen, the RUC chief superintendent 2 years later. But first, let's talk about the lead up to the ambush in Loughgall village. You'll remember this idea was the brainchild of Patrick Kelly, the brigade's commander. He'd been responsible for a few operations before this that followed a similar pattern. British intelligence knew the MO, and weeks before knew the plan. As early as 10 days before, they knew the intended target, which they promptly placed SAS inside, sleeping in shifts. They also had SAS living close to the village, ready to move in when they had reason to believe that the plan had been set in motion, and back roads were being patrolled by the 14th Intelligence Company riding civilian cars. There's 2 distinct possibilities here. One is that the military found information through phone taps and intel patrols. The other is that the IRA had a spy in their ranks. The IRA believed the latter, and I believe the former. To explain, only hours before the attack, masked men hijacked the blue Toyota Hiace. Jim Lina, the commander of this operation, was spotted in town. He was very well known to be in the IRA, and this all happened in Dungannon, a 20-minute drive from Loughgall. You may remember Jim was riding in the back seat during the attack. A backhoe loader was stolen only 2 miles west of town from a farm on Lislosley Road. Declan Arthurs drove to Loughgall while 2 other volunteers stayed in the farm with the couple, and 2 left in a scout car with Arthurs. The reason that these 2 stayed in the barn was obviously so that the couple could not call the police until the operation was over. The digger would have been very conspicuous, and 5 men robbing a farm was likely to raise alarm to security forces, even if it was driven into town from the west along a less populated road. There were so many errors that intelligence could have pieced together, which they were frantically trying to do because they knew Pat Kelly's MO of destroying isolated RUC bases just like this one. The sighting of the commander and the stealing of an excavator let them know that the plan was in motion. Richard English, a professor at the Queen's University in Belfast, believes this leak didn't come from within the East Tyrone Brigade, but he did point out that Tony Gormley had been paid well in the past for turning over information to the Special Branch, and most consider him an informant. Initially, the IRA believed there was a mole in the brigade, but some Republicans later alleged that if there were a mole, he was killed in the ambush right alongside the IRA, an act that would be darkly ironic if true. Tony Gormley rode shotgun on Declan Arthur's digger. So intensely did the Provisional IRA believe they had a spy in their ranks that every member was scrutinized. On March 20th, 1989, Chief Superintendent of the RUC, Harry Breen, was driving back from an informal meeting with Garda officers south of the border. In the passenger seat was Superintendent Bob Buchanan. The meeting that day was unplanned, and according to Garda, Superintendent Buchanan arranged it by phoning the police in the morning. Being discussed was a proposal for Operation Amazing, which aimed to coordinate their efforts against cross-border arms smuggling. This meeting ended at around 3:15 p.m., and at around 3:40, their civilian car took the exit to Napa Road. Why they did this is a mystery. You're looking at the ambush site now, and it lies in a dead zone, a place that couldn't be patrolled by the army because it was just inside their border, but just outside the range of their observation post. Breen must have known that Provisional IRA operated freely in this area and were very likely to set up roadblocks.
Within hours of the murders of Chief Superintendent Harry Breen and Superintendent Bob Buchanan, the question was asked: did the IRA get a tip-off? How did they know to be on the Eden Napa Road at the precise time those senior officers would be making their way home from a high-level meeting at Dundalk Garda Station?
The ambush that killed the two superintendents was witnessed by the owners of 4 cars the IRA ordered to the side of the road, positioned as an informal checkpoint. That's the only reason this much is known. As Buchanan reached the top of the hill, he saw what he probably thought was a British soldier. This was an IRA volunteer dressed in army surplus with black face paint. They flagged the car down, and at the same time their vehicle was overtaken by another cream-colored Lidus van that had been following them. This van pulled into a laneway and 4 masked men hopped out. The man at the road checkpoint was then joined by another hiding in the ditch to the side. Witnesses report that the IRA immediately began shooting, mostly at the driver Buchanan. Their target was Chief Superintendent Breen, and they were out to kidnap him and force him to admit who the spy was. If anyone knew, it would be the Royal Ulster Constabulary's Chief Super. However, he stumbled from the car waving a white handkerchief, obviously very wounded. Figuring they couldn't mend an already broken man, he was executed on the side of the road. Because of how well the IRA's South Armagh Brigade handled this, it's been suggested that there was a rogue Garda agent that tipped them off. It was only revealed in 2013 that Breen was targeted to find the spy, evidence that the history of the Troubles is still being updated and investigated years after the ceasefire.